What do hippos, starvation, and collapsing empires have in common? The Nile. This river was Egypt's lifeline and its deadliest danger. One bad flood meant no crops, and that meant no grain. People starved. Some even ate each other. And that's before you count the crocodiles, or the 3-ton hippos that flipped boats for fun. So answer this. How long would you last, living off a river that could kill you faster than it could feed you? Now, let's talk about what happens when Egypt's greatest blessing turns into its biggest threat. You see, the Nile was the heart of everything: water, food, transportation, survival. But it came with a catch. If the flood didn't behave, neither did the rest of life. If it gets too high, homes would drown underwater. And if it gets too low, then crops would waste away in dry fields. There wasn't exactly a safety net. And if you step outside the reach of the Nile, then you'll find desert. Not the kind you hike through for fun. This was dry, harsh, unshaded, and in the summer, temperatures soared past 38 degrees Celsius. And no, there was no air conditioning, or even a cool breeze most days. But people still built lives there. They worked the land. They raised families. They lived in mud brick homes with palm-thatched roofs. Not much protection, but enough to get by. But if you got dehydrated, sick, or injured, oh boy, things got serious, fast, because at the end of the day, everything came back to one thing: the annual flood. It was the one shot each year to soak the fields and plant crops: barley, wheat. These were staples of the diet. But again, if the flood came up short, then there were no crops and no grain, and famine would set in. Even a 2-meter drop could tip the scales toward disaster. And that's exactly what happened around 2200 BC. The Nile failed, not once, multiple times. The result was vicious: food shortages, starvation. Some texts from the time even mention cannibalism. It wasn't common, but it was bad enough to be written down, which says a lot. Whole regions collapsed. The Old Kingdom, the big centralized government, the pyramids, the lot. It all collapsed. Archaeologists back this up with climate data. Turns out, Egypt's Nile crisis was part of a wider global event we now call the 4.2 kilo-year event. Bit of a mouthful, but basically, think of it as ancient climate crisis. Later, Egyptian rulers tried to get smarter about it. For instance, during the Middle Kingdom, kings like Amenemhat III started building canals and reservoirs, especially in the Fayum. The idea was to store floodwater, spread it out, gain some control. And it worked. Sometimes. But the river never fully played along. Even in the wealthier eras, like the New Kingdom, life in the countryside still depended on whether the flood showed up on time and in the right amount. One bad year could throw everything off. Now, during a drought, the Nile could turn into a slow-moving mess. With less water pushing through, the flow would weaken and eventually just stop. And that's when things got ugly. Pollutants like runoff, waste, and dead stuff. All of that starts piling up. Oxygen levels would drop. The fish would suffocate. The water would turn dark, earning the charming nickname Black Tide. Not a great day to go fishing. Or breathing, really. The smell alone was enough to clear a village. And if that didn't do it, the water itself, which was now toxic and undrinkable, definitely would. Now, without a background in microbiology, the ancient Egyptians had to work with what they knew. To them, this was wrath, divine punishment, a curse from the gods. And to be fair, it probably felt like one. People got spooked. They stopped using the river. They turned to backup water supplies like wells or ponds that hadn't seen a good cleaning in, ever, which only made things worse. Diseases spread. Morale dropped. All because the river decided to take a sick day. But that wasn't the only time the Nile caused mayhem. You see, every year during the inundation, what they called Akhet, the river swelled up and spilled out. Fields, roads, and even entire neighborhoods disappeared under water for weeks. And yet, the river stayed essential. You still needed to get to the market, or the temple, or deliver 40 sacks of barley to a tax official who was definitely not accepting excuses. So, people got on boats. A lot of boats. Most of them were made from papyrus or simple wooden planks, basically glorified bathtubs with paddles. And during flood season, that was a gamble. The current could go from gentle to good luck holding onto your oars in minutes. Even seasoned rowers got tossed, and without life jackets, or let's be honest, strong swimming skills, drowning was common, especially for women and children who were less likely to have swimming training. It was tragic and, unfortunately, routine. Transporting grain was another issue. You had to do it. Grain kept the economy moving and stomachs full, but a tipped boat meant soggy cargo, and soggy cargo meant lost food, lost taxes, and angry scribes with papyrus scrolls full of debt. And all of this, still framed through the lens of religion. Again, if someone drowned or a boat capsized, it might have been the gods sending a message. Don't mess with the river, or at least, maybe wait till next week. But even the riverbanks weren't safe. You see, the soil along the Nile was soft. It was built up over thousands of years. Yet sometimes it didn't stay put. People fetching water or walking too close could suddenly find the ground beneath them. Gone. Just gone. Ancient texts talk about people being swallowed by the earth. That's as real as it gets. And if the collapsing bank didn't get you, a crocodile might. Because yes, no matter where you go, those were always around. Just hanging out, doing their crocodile thing. Waiting. And speaking of crocodiles, the Nile did indeed have its own ecosystem of hazards. Like we said, these crocodiles, they sure loved to creep around in the reeds and ambush whatever got too close. But the real nightmare? Hippos. Yes, hippos. They were massive, territorial, and weirdly fast for something that size. 3 tons of muscle, aggression, and jaw strength that could crush bone. This ain't exactly the image most people have of the Nile, but that was the reality back then. And here's the wild part. Despite being massive in size, hippos can sprint. Yes, sprint, at 18 miles per hour, on land. Now, imagine that coming at you, or imagine being in a boat. Yeah, they flipped boats. They trampled crops. Farmers hated them. Fishermen feared them. And if you got too close, they could kill you. And sometimes Egyptians hunted them, not for sport, for survival. We actually have tomb carvings showing the whole scene, hunters in tiny boats, chucking harpoons at animals the size of minivans. It was brave or desperate. Probably both. Miss your shot or get too close, and you might not make it back. And this wasn't some exaggerated legend. We've found medical texts with step-by-step treatments for hippo bites. Apparently it came up often enough to be worth writing down. Farmers even filed complaints. Seriously, there's one papyrus where a devastated harvest gets summed up like this. The worm took half, and the hippopotamus ate the rest. Yep, that's an actual quote. So, living by the Nile? It meant relying on it, but also fearing it. You watched the flood. You watched the riverbank. You watched your back. Because whatever was hiding in the water, it was probably hungry. And the danger didn't end there. Not by far. The land itself, it's also out to get you. Snakes and scorpions were everywhere. Under rocks, in the tall grass, inside your house sometimes. And yeah, some were deadly. The Brooklyn Papyrus, a medical guide from ancient Egypt, lists dozens of snake species. It even documents the symptoms of their bites, which is both fascinating and horrifying. So from how much Egyptians feared these creatures, they had to study them closely. They also turned to the divine. Wadjet, the cobra goddess, was a favorite. Serket, protector from scorpion stings, was another. Healers used copper salts, onions, and other ingredients. But they didn't rely on medicine alone. They added spells too. And even with all that effort, sometimes the snake venom still won. Or the infection set in. Because out here, you simply couldn't ignore nature. The desert was dangerous and symbolic. It wasn't some empty land. To the Egyptians, the desert belonged to Seth, the god of chaos. It pressed up against the green Nile Valley like a threat waiting to spill over. So, yeah, life was never secure. It was always one step away from falling apart. So, people learned to live with risk. They learned when to move, where to step, how to listen, how to teach their kids to do the same. A child growing up in Egypt knew how to avoid snake bites, how to read the river, how to respect what could kill them, because while the Nile gave Egypt its life, it never gave anyone a break. And hey, if surviving the wild wasn't hard enough, wait till you see what counted as a day job. But we'll save that for another video, so see you next time.